All right. Good afternoon to those on my side of the Atlantic. Good morning to those on your side. And I'm very happy that we're able to do this last moment Morbid Symptoms podcast on the Democratic Game of Thrones. As you all probably have heard, or most of you have probably heard, Biden has finally dropped out and we're on with the intrigue. So I quickly texted or DM'd or whatever you want to call it, my friend of the show, Dr. Studebaker, and said, Benjamin, I want on the agenda, I want 30 minutes because we have to do Democrat Game of Thrones. I want to be, I don't know what character you would be. I don't know if you had to pick a character, your Game of Thrones character, who would that be, do you think?
Probably one of the peasants who's dead.
Oh no. You wouldn't be the hand? You'd be the hand.
I'm not part of the establishment. I don't have any influence, so I can't be. Maybe one of those really minor lords that is never really on screen.
One of the bastards. Yeah, you have to, to prove yourself. I don't know.
One of those tiny little barons who has enough resources to keep himself going, but not enough to be a player.
Yeah. And what was that thing where the guy went with where all the books were? Did you? Oh, by the way, did you watch the series or else?
Yeah, I've seen it.
Yeah, so there was some place where they went where all the stuff was kept. Well, like the scrolls and whatnot. I can't remember because it was like Jon Snow's, like that pudgy guy.
Yeah, all the maesters, the advisors, they have a library tower.
Yeah, you would. Yeah,
I used to remember the details better 10 years ago.
Well, it's been a while. Yeah, it's been a while. It's just
he never writes the book, so you forget over time.
Yeah, it could be. Well, I don't know. Maybe fame or that level of fame where it's a double-edged sword. Anyway. I don't want to take up too much. I don't want to take up too much time on that. We want to give the people what they want. We want to give them the red meat, Benjamin.
All right.
If you can't beat them, join them. So, first thoughts on the Game of Thrones, on the Democrat Game of Thrones. What were your first thoughts, or about that, or just about the coverage, whatever?
I just thought, wow, they actually got him to go. Mm-hmm. I was really surprised that they really actually got him to go because he seemed so committed to sticking around. The night before he dropped out, he tweeted, I will win this election at 6 p.m. Central, 7 Eastern. The evening, on Saturday evening, he tweeted, I will win. And but the following day, Joe Manchin joined the crowd. It was so many different people who's backstabbed him. You had Schumer backstabbing him, Obama backstabbing him, George Clooney backstabbing him, Nancy Pelosi. You had, Manchin. We had, and then all of the media people, the entire New York Times editorial board. So many people backstabbed him. And it took a lot of knives because he really did not want to go. There was a piece that came out, I think it was the morning of the day he dropped out. So before he dropped out, but that same day in the morning, from Axios, about how he has this grudge against Obama for not having backed him in 2016.
Oh, Jesus. Okay.
And he thinks that the Obama people were wrong to not back him because Hillary ultimately lost. And he doesn't trust any of their political instincts. So when it was initially Axelrod and all these Obama people who were saying you can't win, he said, well, that's what you said in 2016 and you backed Hillary and she lost. And apparently his kind of line has been, what, you think Kamala Harris can win? Come on. You guys got this all wrong last time. And I think he had a point. I think he underestimated the degree to which he was in trouble. But I do think he has a point about Harris and the weaknesses of Harris as a candidate. I think of Harris as kind of, to give, if you're a Democrat or you're European or you're someone who doesn't really get why someone wouldn't like Harris, just imagine that it's 1992, right? And George H.W. Bush has decided to drop out. He's not going to run in 92. And they just give it to Dan Quayle, right? How'd you feel about that? Would you go, well, Dan Quayle is the vice president. He's qualified. What, do you hate Hoosiers? Is that why you won't support Vice President Quayle? I don't think people would be making that argument if the shoe was on the other foot. I don't think so. And I think people need to realize that for many, many Americans, Kamala Harris is Dan Quayle.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good historical and not too far back. Not we're not, but give Benjamin time. He might go back and bring up an obscure Roman emperor, at least obscure to me. It was so funny. That's another story though. But please do, because obviously there's lots of tangent that, bringing up there's kind of a lot of Shakespearean, a lot of drama going on here. And I was surprised because when I found out, when I saw the letter, I guess the tweet of the letter, and I looked at it and I go, well, he didn't mention, and like he mentioned her, but he didn't endorse her. So I thought, well, okay, maybe he doesn't want to do that. And then a little while later, he did, and then I thought, well, he is vindictive. So do you think that part of he's still, because he's out, so he's out, he's been kicked out, he can't occupy the game of the throne anymore, the Iron Throne, the U.S.
Unless something terrible were to happen to Harris.
Yeah, I mean, he's still the president unless they really want to, make sure he can't. I mean, I don't know if that what
they'd have to use the 25th Amendment to remove him.
So he's still there for a while, but he's still in the game, of course. And so I think that was so people thinking that he loves Kamala Harris. And I would want to ask you, do you think that was just to be a vindictive thing to make it more difficult for them to step over her by him fully?
It's because of the money. It's the money. So people who have donated to Biden because the president and the vice president are on a ticket together have donated to Harris. So an argument can be made that if Harris uses the money that was donated for Biden's run, that these people already on some level donated to her. Okay. And therefore she is not stealing money that was donated for a different purpose. If a different Democrat is on the ticket, legal arguments could be made that the use of the Biden war chest is theft from the donors. Okay. This creates a material incentive to stick with Harris, even though she's a bad candidate.
Do you buy it?
I think there's a point there financially, but I think that Harris is a very weak candidate. I think I might be, of all the commentators, I might be the one who is the least enthused about Harris. I've had so many thoughts about Harris that are not good. Like, for instance, the other day,
don't worry about it. I'm not a Kamala fan, so don't worry. You won't upset me. Go to town.
Good. There was a piece that came out in the Hill a few days ago that went, why not Hillary Clinton? And I was talking to a friend about it, and we were kind of laughing at how out of touch it is. And I said, but wait a minute, let's be really honest for a second. Isn't Hillary Clinton a stronger candidate than Harris? Despite everything? Wouldn't she be a stronger candidate than Harris?
I'm sure she thinks so.
if you're gonna drink soda, right? Drink Coke, not Diet Coke. Harris is Diet Coke to
She's
Hillary's
caffeine-free Diet Coke. She's caffeine-free Diet Coke. Caffeine-free flat Diet Coke.
Yeah, right. If you're going to do this kind of thing, at least, Hillary Clinton stands for something. What she stands for might be considered by many people to be totally evil, but there's a certain anti-charisma, like Richard Nixon has with Republicans. There's a certain anti-charisma to just being blatantly for really dark, nasty stuff that Harris, in pretending to not be that while still being a prosecutor who, everybody knows the old stories about, well, maybe they don't, about how she withheld evidence that would have gotten somebody off a death row. All the people she locked up for petty drug offenses, all the people that she locked up for their kids not showing up to school. Harris is a really, really nasty piece of work.
So in that way, she has some things in common with Joe Biden in terms of his
she has some things in common with
policies.
Vance. Both Harris and Vance are positioned as being advocates for groups that they have actually, if you look at what they've done, or you look at Vance and what he's written, they have consistently betrayed and undermined the groups that they are positioned as having been champions of. It's precisely those groups that they're positioned as having been champions of that they've done the most damage to, in the case of Harris with her action as district attorney, in the case of Vance with Hillbilly Elegy, where he is, some of the things he says about people in Appalachia, about how they don't want to work and reject opportunities that are available to them, are just so horrific. This is, And this is why, like, if people think, oh, Studebaker's criticizing Harris, is he for Trump and Vance? Then no, I just think all of these people are terrible. And that's why I don't treat all of this with the seriousness that some people treat it with, because it's all a bunch of bad options. Why should anybody be taking it seriously when people are being ridiculous in front of you? All of them are being ridiculous. You don't have to pretend that any of them is serious or worthy of your respect or sustained attention.
Yeah, I can't remember. It was somebody. I don't know if it was someone high up in the DNC. It was, I can't remember his name. I forgot. I probably saved it, but I didn't put it in the slide. And right after the Biden announcement, he went on like, "Thanks, the backstabbers and the people who wanted to flee the ship. You just cost us the best president of my lifetime." And I'm all like, okay.
Yeah, that's ridiculous. Of course, there is a kernel there, which is that many people are going to see this as disloyal stuff. And I'm sure it has damaged for a lot of people who might consider voting Republican. The social science indicates care more about loyalty than Democratic base voters. So the core Democratic voters don't care about loyalty and view this as expeditious and necessary. But the people who are fence sitters will find this to have been disloyal. And it will rub them the wrong way, even if they don't like Biden or didn't even vote for Biden. And that's what I've been hearing a lot of in Indiana. I'm hearing a lot of people who didn't like Biden, didn't vote for him last time, who had been made more sympathetic to him by what the Democrats were doing to him, and are now really mad at the Democratic Party for having treated one of their own in such a callous way.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like, it's like when all the kids who could take care of granddad don't, and they just kind of push them off into a home or something. And again, and it's easy to find, and I guess it's a good thing if we find ourselves at a human level having empathy for that, and then you remember all the things that he's done and not done, and you're like, well,
right, like say your grandfather was a segregationist, right? And now he's senile and unable to do anything good for anybody. And say he used to beat you when you were a kid. It's still not great if you like dump him in a ditch, right?
Yeah.
It's still that's a bad look. Yes, he's a segregationist who beat you when you were a kid, but also it's a bad look to dump him in a ditch.
Yeah.
And you could try to explain to people, well, he was a segregationist who beat me when I was a kid. But they'll still go, but come on, he's senile and you dumped him in a ditch.
Yeah. So it's hard to square that circle. Speaking of Hillary Clinton and knowing who she is, Tulsi Gabbard tweeted this out. And let me see if I can see it if my contacts aren't in. So this is Tulsi Gabbard. And she may only be known in the States. She ran for president in the 2020 primary and in the 2016 primary. I think both, didn't she? In the Democratic ticket.
I remember 2020 for sure. She didn't get a very large number, and then she was pushed out of the party.
Yeah, and then she became, I don't know if she went independent. She also was very critical of what she would call the woke stuff. And, probably rightly. So she says, Biden's out, Kamala is in. Don't be fooled. Policies won't change. Just like Biden wasn't the one calling the shots, Kamala Harris won't be either. She is the new figurehead for the deep state and the maidservant of Hillary Clinton, queen of the cabal of warmongers. They will continue their efforts to engulf the world in war and taking away our liberty. So that's nice. The cabal of warmongers. Yeah. And I don't know. So yeah. So then that makes me want to. So that's why in my little promo, I had the Queen Hillary Cersei first of her name, in addition to Queen Kamala Cersei first of her name. And I can't see this idea that somehow the Clintons are actually really want Kamala to run and win, and that somehow she wouldn't take. Do you think that that she wouldn't take this opportunity? Do you think that she's really not calculating, or her camp isn't calculating some way of putting her on the ticket, and not as VP? I can't see her doing the VP thing unless some accident happens sometimes. I don't know. So do you, if you want to respond?
No, she wouldn't be a good pick for VP. They'll pick somebody young from the Midwest, maybe a Buttigieg or a Pritzker or somebody like that. Probably a man, probably a white person from the Midwest. Not because they should do that, but that's just how they tend to think. It's been my observation that they think that if they have someone who is not a white man on the ticket, then the other person must be a white man because they think in terms of demographic tick boxing. I don't approve of it. I think it's awful, but this is how they think.
Yeah.
It's
Well,
very racist. It's
well, they
very
have to solve
racist and it's very
something.
sexist that they think like that.
It always makes me think of I think it's a lawyer's phrase, like if you don't have the facts, you argue the law. And if you don't have the law, you argue the facts. And I guess if you don't have neither, you kind of go with identity politics or something, you know? If you don't have the record and you don't have the policy really that you want to, that you can showcase a lot, then I guess you just have to go with the person or the whatever kind of brand you can try to push to people.
Yeah, they start from the premise that color of the skin or what you have between your legs is the most important thing about a potential nominee. It's just awful that they think like this. It's an insult to Martin Luther King and our whole tradition.
But I think go ahead.
On this point of, I think that the thing that's really amazing about this is that Biden was someone who would not go unless absolutely every part of the party united in a coordinated way over a period of 3 weeks to drip, drip, drip negative stories and negative meetings over and over and over again. It took a lot of work by these people. And it wasn't just one of them. It was Hillary, and it was Obama, and it was Schumer, and it was Pelosi, and it was Manchin on the final day. And I think Manchin on the final day was the last straw.
Okay.
Because that came out after the tweet of "I will win the election." I think when he lost Manchin, he went, "Okay, I've lost the middle of the party too."
Yeah. So you don't see any way that we could be having a repeat of 2016. You don't think there's anything? I mean, I certainly I would do. I guess the least important question is if she wants it. At this stage, would Hillary want it? And then, but the most important thing is there a pathway? And being as devious, remember this is Democrat Game of Thrones, so no holds barred.
You would need a mess at the convention.
You
would need a mess at the convention because it's still the case that the delegates at the convention have to vote at the convention for Harris. And because they were previously bound to Biden, it's not obvious that they have to vote for Harris. They don't have to. They're not bound to vote for Harris because she wasn't the one who won the primaries. So there's a possibility that we could come into the convention and the delegates could not be united behind Harris. And if that happens, then you would get a series of votes like in the old days. And if that series of votes went on long enough, it's basically like the Vatican. The process at that point is like how they pick a pope. So you have a series of votes, and if somebody doesn't get enough votes, you have another vote, and you just go again and again. And it can go on for a long time. Historically, sometimes it went on for days and days. Why are these conventions multiple days long? Because originally, you might have a series of votes that would take multiple days. You might have people meeting at night in hotel rooms away from the cameras discussing how they're going to vote in the next day's vote. It was a very dark, shadowy process with insiders doing stuff. And what you would see, if you would see any of it, and very, very few of these conventions in the old style were televised because television came along right as this process was ending, in part because television is not compatible with this process. It is not good TV to watch it. Nasty, nasty process. That said, if the party unity breaks down enough between now and the convention, maybe because Harris makes mistakes between now and then, you could have something like that. And then you would start to get, after enough votes, a desperation to have somebody that has name recognition that everybody can get behind. And in that scenario, maybe you could talk about a Hillary Clinton. A lot of the people who are prominent, who are good candidates, don't want this cycle. They don't want to run. Someone like Whitmer doesn't want this. So you might find yourself in a situation where someone who would only get it spoiled, who would never win a primary, like Hillary, might take it in a situation where you go 3-4 votes deep and you still don't have agreement. But I think the fact that they were able to get rid of Biden is suggestive that they're capable of generating a high level of unity.
Okay.
And so for that reason, I think it's Harris's thing to lose at this point. Harris would have to do something to disrupt the unity that they are trying to create around her. She would have to be so bad at this that she loses it when it's handed to her. But I can't rule that out because Harris is really bad at this kind of stuff. She is not a good politician, and she could screw it up. There's 4 weeks, about a month. It's a lot of time.
Yeah. No, and I was also thinking that I wonder how much they're just going to let other people talk about her rather than have her go around and say anything for herself. They're going to have all the surrogates come out and tell their Kamala stories, and what a wonderful thing it would be that the first, Indian African American. I get confused anyway. She's African American and Indian American. I think her mom was Indian and her dad is African American. I'm not sure. Anyway, woman of color. We'll say that's a safer one. Yeah. But I have a question because I don't know if it was Jimmy Dore, if it was Ryan Grimm, it was somebody. And I think they had come up with a scenario where you could circumvent the delegate process. Yeah, because you have the delegates and then you have the super delegates. And then you have, I guess maybe this was the theory when if Biden actually made it through the convention and then after the convention pulled out, and then that would allow just a really small group of people to decide who they were going to appoint. Let me see if I can pull up that Jimmy Dore tweet. I think it was him, and because it seems like he might be missing a step. Let me see. I'm gonna zoom this out as well so that I can see it better. Okay, let's see if that works. Okay. All right, I'll read this. So this is from yesterday. And this is a response. I don't know who I muted. I'm probably muted POTUS because I was tired of hearing this stuff. So Jimmy Dore said, feel like this was the party's plan all along, which is why they didn't allow any debates or a real primary, and why they had to make sure they forced RFK out of the primary because he would have been next in line for the nomination in this situation. Doing it this way, only loyal establishment party delegates would be selected for the convention. So when the party finally forced Biden out, they would have only establishment loyal delegates to choose the new nominee, assuring an establishment nominee. So the Democrats rigged another primary, which makes that 3 in a row from the party who says that democracy is on the ballot. LOL. Once again, the Democratic Party doesn't have elections. They have selections for the presidential nominee, and you're just going to have to take it. Okay, so that was something a bit different. Okay, that was a different. That doesn't that jives with what you just said, because I heard some. I remember. I think it was maybe Ryan Grimm was saying that it would be better to have an open convention than to have like a coronation, to go through and have Biden nominated, then like a week later say, well, I have to bow out. But yeah, I don't know if you want to say about that.
People forget what the point of the primary process is. It's to legitimate the selection process, right? And ideally, the primary process from the point of view of the party does not diminish the party elite's control over the process. It legitimates a process, right? And that it used to be the mainstream view that the primaries hadn't really changed who's in charge. That used to be, the party decides view in the political science literature was dominant for a long time, really until Trump disrupted it. And it took the view that the main function of the primaries was to legitimate what would have likely already happened anyway at the convention, and to produce a level of unity at an earlier stage of the race so that you have fewer ill feelings at later stages of the race that can then weaken you relative to the other party nominee. Once one of the parties unites behind a candidate very early and has that candidate in the race 6 months ahead, you're at a big disadvantage if you then pick your candidate later on after an acrimonious debate. Big disadvantage. So nobody wants to wait until the convention, or worse, to pick the nominee after the convention. Nobody wants that. The goal is to have the nominee settled as early as possible. So their goal was to keep anybody from really getting traction in the primary, so that they would be settled on Biden in a very early stage. And then they hoped Biden would be in good shape and it would be all right. And that's why they went so crazy after the debate, because they themselves were shocked and appalled by what happened at the debate. They were completely taken unawares by that. Yeah,
how
because
could that be?
At the State of the Union, there were a few months ago, They thought he looked really good. They were all telling each other he was fine, and they talked each other into it. And what people don't realize is that elites are not brilliant people. They're just elites. So they talk, and they're in a thought bubble. They only talk to each other, and they just chattered at each other after the State of the Union about how presidential he was, look how much energy he has. And meanwhile, some of us were like, is he on amphetamines?
Yeah.
Have they drugged him up?
Yeah.
What have they done to get him to be able to do this? But the reality of age is that there are good days and bad days. There are times when the president's going to look better, and there are times that he's going to look worse. And when he's reading a teleprompter at the State of the Union, he's probably going to look better than when he's on a debate stage and he's doing something ad hoc late in the evening
with no audience.
He might have COVID.
With no audience.
Or at least he's got a cold. He's going to look worse in that situation. But they rationalized it. It's not that they lied to everybody about it. They rationalized it. They talked themselves into it. And part of what happened here is that Biden did these calls with members of Congress where he tried to reassure them. And he came across badly on these private calls. And the members of Congress were shocked at how bad the calls were. They were much worse than these people themselves thought they would be. And a lot of the argument that we're hearing is that Biden has gotten significantly worse over the course of the last year. So a year ago, there were significant chunks of the day where you could get a Biden that seems enough like a Biden that you could talk yourself into, he's enough like a Biden. Now the windows of the day where you get that are not predictable, right? It's not like, he's always good for 6 hours in the middle of the day. No, now it's, he's up, he's down, he's all around, and that's dementia. And another thing about dementia is that you get into these paranoid doom loops. So one of the things that was going on, and this Axios piece that came out, I thought was fascinating. This Axios piece that came out the morning of, Axios was founded by somebody who's currently a deep, one of the founders who's currently deep in the Biden administration, like a serious Biden administration high-level advisor. So Axios has Biden ties, not just Democratic ties, but Biden ties. Axios puts out this piece about how he's got this long-term issue with Obama and with Obama's people related to 2016. And they put all this out in public, which was just air it, just air how.
Well, might as well. I mean,
they are about it.
Now would be the time.
No, they just totally aired it. It was just an incredible piece that came out the morning before. And Axios, they like to really organize things in a very cut and dry and very, so it's beautifully laid out. It's a great little piece of DC insider stuff. But this Axios piece had me just thinking, Biden must be in, with COVID, in seclusion, in this dementia doom loop about how they never took me seriously. They never accepted my success. They picked Hillary over me. And I've seen really old people with dementia do this, where they just ruminate and they repeat over and over an old grudge. And they forget that they've already thought about it today. It keeps popping back into their head and it goes over and over and it becomes a really negative loop. And I think that's what Biden has been going through for the past few days. I think he's been ruminating about Barack Obama, going, they never liked me. They didn't pick me in 2016. He wasn't there for me in 2016. Just over and over. And that's torture. That's a person whose brain is torturing them. It's very sad.
Yeah. No, I can see that. And I'd forgotten about that if you're somebody's vice president for 2 terms, you're kind of expecting them to give you the option to run. And if you do run, they would support you. Yeah.
To do a little homage here, guess what? He would have won that race.
Yeah, he probably would. I don't know if he would have called them deplorable, because it wasn't so crazy yet.
He was much better liked at that point.
Yeah.
It was Hillary
before
who
Russiagate.
turned it
That was
into
before
that.
Russiagate and all that stuff.
Yeah, it was Hillary who turned it into that with all that basket of deplorable stuff. And it's the Hillary people who go, if you don't support Hillary, you're bad. And they're doing the same thing with Harris because they don't learn. Because they're stupid.
Yeah.
If you don't support Harris, then what? Do you hate these demographic groups? This is tired. Nobody buys this anymore.
Well, no, and that's why I think
they did.
And that's why I think there used to be. I think that from my point of view, and it's just because I'm so immune to being called names that I know don't apply to me, but it takes a while because and again, I'm not in a public, well, I mean, I'm on screen now, but I'm not, a known entity that would really cause problems if someone started to call me, a racist or whatever. But yeah, I think that I don't know again, but your point is quite well, is that they're in these self-referential loops. They convince each other, or they think, I don't know, what's that term? Is it Robert Fowler? Is it Zizek about the belief without an owner? So they believe because they think others believe. And the people who they think believe are acting like they believe because they think this person believes. And then it comes to think, oh, maybe nobody really believes that he's all right. But it felt like people did. So like an objective belief, I guess, or something like that. So, and I think that, yeah, I can see that happening. But
the stuff he did to make it better made it worse. Those phone calls he made it worse.
Well, he called the one guy the black guy, like I think the head of the Defense Department. Is it
there's just a steady stream of leaks, and all of these things would have been rationalized before the debate. People would have rationalized them away. It's not like Biden never gaffed until he got dementia. Biden has always been a bit of a gaffe machine. People used to go, it's a stutter. Biden, that's just how he is. I got hairy legs that turn blonde in the sun. Corn pop, you can't stop. Like all of that.
And he keeps on saying that he saw that he did some march with Mandela or something.
Right. But now when he does those things, it's dementia. And once it changed like that, it's no longer he's overcome a stutter. He's Biden. He's just having fun.
Yeah.
Now he's got dementia. Every time he makes any mistake, no matter how big.
Yeah. Well, and especially because I have, the age that I'm at, I've seen with my grandparents in particular. Now my parents are also getting a bit old, but not so far, none of that. But the anger response is real. The kind of like, when it's just what's something to you, you think, what's so, but you kind of realize you don't know what's been going on in their mind all day.
Yeah. And that's why he's not getting in front of a camera to talk about this.
Yeah.
He has nothing nice to say. And in front of a camera, he might let it loose.
Yeah, that would be great. That would be some good Democrat Game of Thrones stuff.
They won't let it happen. They know that he's really pissed. They've probably gone into meetings with him and they try to talk to him about what to do and how to do it. And he just keeps going in the loop and saying, they betrayed me. They never believed in me.
Yeah, and I can't see. I mean, I don't know. I only know Hunter from the press. He doesn't seem like he would be much of a comfort, but maybe he is. But anyway, Rod, and this was a blast from the past. It took me a while because I knew this guy's name. I knew there was some sort of scandal.
Blagojevich was at the RNC. He was at the RNC with convicts or in proximity to convicts for Trump, ex-cons for Trump.
Okay.
Blago, because he was pardoned by Trump. He was let out by Trump. I'm not sure if he was pardoned or if the sentence was commuted.
But I can't remember what he did. It was something about money. It wasn't like money in the
fridge.
He
was accused of having sold Barack Obama's Senate seat.
Oh, that was
money, because he had the right as the governor of Illinois to appoint the replacement for Obama. Now, this is something some people think that it's a fake case and that he didn't actually do it or the evidence wasn't actually good. So it's still something people argue about, but he did end up getting impeached and removed.
Yeah. Anyway, this was from yesterday because I clipped this like 2 hours ago. So it's 21 hours ago so it's yesterday. So Rod Blagojevich, I've known Obama since 1995. We both came out of Chicago politics. I know how it works. He's behind the campaign to dump 15 million Democratic primary voters and replace Biden with his choice. Classic Chicago Democrat machine politics. Selection over election. The bosses over the people. Yeah. Any I mean,
of course, he just is a Republican now because he was at the RNC. He's loyal to Trump because Trump got him out of prison.
Yeah, but I don't know if this helps Trump at all. This is just him, I mean, that could be, but do you think there's anything? Do you think that there's you could call Chicago like the machine politics from Tammany Hall?
Oh, absolutely,
absolutely.
Because it's coming from Blagojevich, it's a political intervention rather than just a personal
but I mean,
view.
there doesn't mean there's no truth to it. Yeah.
Oh no, there's certainly truth to it. I mean, this was something that came from the elites in the party, And it wasn't a constitutional or formal procedural process. If they wanted to remove Biden through a constitutional or formal process, they had the 25th Amendment readily available to them. They could say the president is incompetent. The thing is, they haven't officially acknowledged that he's incompetent, because if they really think he's incompetent, then by the Constitution, they should do the 25th Amendment and remove him from office. But they're not willing to admit that the president is incompetent, but they clearly believe it because they don't think he's fit to run.
Yeah. Well, no, that's a good question. It's just like, if this is coming out, but somehow it's fine for him to remain in that position until, what is it, January 4th or whatever it is, January 4th or 5th.
Yeah, another 6 months. It's not like there's deteriorating Biden.
Yeah, so it's like there's nothing going on. I mean, and I think that your point is well put, that people tend to forget that there's a whole apparatus behind it. You call it the Biden Regency. So it's not like nobody's answering the phone if he gets mad. But still, it is, I mean, has there been an administration like, I mean, I don't know how far, it was never clear to me, and I wasn't as into politics, of course, all that time ago, how far gone Ronald Reagan was towards the end of his second term.
Yeah, the second Reagan administration was in the same range. It was in the same range, but the media helped him hide it. But it was in the same range. Very rarely do we actually get presidents that are old enough to have these kinds of problems. Historically, we have not tended to nominate people who are this old for these kinds of positions. That's changed in recent years, as the boomers have been kind of diehard about their role in society and unwilling to acknowledge that they can't do it anymore. One of the leading orchestrators of this is Pelosi, who's 84. Yeah. Even older than Biden.
And isn't Mitch McConnell still in there? And he keeps on freezing up. I mean, he's also somebody that's...
He stepped down as a majority leader, but he's finishing off the term, I think.
Okay.
I think
isn't it nice that they get to do that?
I could be wrong about that.
Isn't it nice that they get to do that? Yeah.
Well, that's the election, right? He was elected. They elected someone who is too old to serve. And so this is what you get when you elect someone who's too old to serve. There's a certain reasonableness to that. If you're going to vote for people who are senile, then when they're senile, you voted for a senile person. If we're going to do that, there's a consequence to it. We should pay it sometimes.
Well, listen to you. I'm not going to bring up the fact that this is kind of a different approach to your beneficence towards the compact people, but that's a story for another time.
Well, we're talking about politicians here.
Yeah, right? Okay. Oh, well, voters get what you want. Yeah, you're talking about the voters.
Well, when it comes to democracy, we have to think about these institutions and whether they work. I'm either having some fun the institutions, and we ought to be bound by what they decide, or we problematize the institutions in their current form. I would be for problematizing a lot of these institutions. I think they clearly are not working very well, and we need to think about whether we should have a political system that produces an octogenarian president. Is that a system, or should we change it in certain deep and serious ways?
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a minimum age. And of course, I'm guessing it's not a surprise that when they were thinking about these things, they weren't contemplating having 80-some-year-old people.
Imagine having a society that requires a maximum age for the president, because left to its own devices, the society would elect an octogenarian.
Well,
the fact that we would even need the rule, like in the past, there were octogenarians, but people in the past never thought, oh, let's make one of them president. People in the past had an understanding of what it means to be an octogenarian that we don't seem to have now. Something has gone terribly wrong that people think, oh, that's no problem. We can do that.
Well, or what we thought maybe was a norm that was understood maybe isn't when, gets thrown out the window.
But when you start needing hard rules, it's because people can't figure it out on their own.
Yeah. No, I mean... I'm just saying, but just if you're going to, but you could say the same thing about why have a rule about how young it could be. You could make the same argument that people should have been able to figure that out, that you shouldn't let a 14-year-old or something.
Isn't that interesting that the people who wrote the Constitution thought it was necessary to tell people you can't have somebody under 35, but they didn't think it was necessary to set a maximum. Because they believed that while somebody might, stupidly vote for a 20-something, nobody would stupidly vote for someone who's too old to govern the country.
And that was before age was such a, being young, youth was so fetishized. Anyway, someone called, so just to get through some of these tweets, I think it's interesting, all the stuff coming out now. So AOC apparently, I don't know if you caught about that, but it seemed like the squad was upset. Like the squad did not seem to be happy about the possibility of Biden pulling out, was the impression that I got. And they were
Bernie and the
quite upset about
think
people.
That they can work with Biden. They liked the human infrastructure bill, and they don't fault Biden for the fact that it was watered down into the Inflation Reduction Act. They viewed Biden as somebody who gave them a seat at the table, and they were totally satisfied with the scraps that he offered them. They were really sycophantic toward him the entire time he was in office, and they stayed loyal to him till the end. And as a consequence of this, they'll now have even less influence with the next Democrat, even less.
Well, can't they just pretend like it didn't happen and start saying, "Yes, Kamala, you've always been an honorary member of the squad." They're going to give her a pink lady jacket. They're going to give her a pink lady jacket, and Rizzo will eventually come along.
AOC did take photographs with Harris during the 2020 run and did entertain, I believe, endorsing her for some period of time when she was refusing to get behind Bernie for that lengthy period at the start of that race. But I think it's funny. Where do people draw the line? You will have the DSA pulling its endorsement of AOC only at the stage at which she's on the wrong side in their view of the Israeli-Palestinian issue, or she's supporting Biden at a time when they think that she shouldn't. But they stayed loyal to AOC when she betrayed the railroad strikers. And they stayed loyal to AOC when she said that Medicare for all was just a negotiating tactic to get a public option. That stuff wasn't important enough to them to be worthy of considering pulling the endorsement. And in a similar kind of way, AOC and Bernie stuck with Biden through all kinds of stuff that I would have problematized. Lots of people would have problematized. And now, they're here at the bitter end, and they've stuck with him so long that nobody can argue that they're going to get anything beneficial for having done this. And indeed, there are a lot of people who are going to go, how come you didn't add your voices to the call? We maybe could have gotten him out a week earlier. Maybe 2 weeks earlier, and we'd have had more time. There will be a grudge against them in the party. And AOC deferred to Nancy Pelosi on so many substantive issues that affect working people, but not on this issue. This is the issue where AOC decides not to listen to Nancy. I think it's amazing the priorities that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has developed.
Yeah. And those videos are hard to watch. I guess she's trying to it's a bit too TikTok for TikTok. I mean, I'm like,
she's trying to do a millennial thing.
I'm like, all right. I mean,
I've spent too much time in the UK, and you probably have as well. If you spend a lot of time around British politics, these emotional displays that people do in the States, they don't read the same way to you. I find it very hard to realize, and I know that this is a fault of mine because it means I'm sometimes out of step and I don't get how stuff is being received. But that really angry, emotional messaging that American politicians do, there's always this British part of me that goes, "Oh, there's no way that can possibly work. Oh, that's just far too much."
Yeah. Ugh. Yeah, no, that's I don't know. Maybe it'll change if things start to crack a bit more. I mean, things were getting a bit more dicey. We had nothing compared to what goes on here, and I don't know if it's. Who knows at what point everything became about the feelings and the performance of it all.
It's also in part because the president combines the functions of the prime minister and the queen. So there are certain emotional attachments that come to the president because the president, there is no monarch in the United States. Whereas in the British political system, it's perfectly normal for the party to knife the prime minister and nobody thinks about it. Adam Tooze had this quote where he was railing against the fact that America is this way, but of course it is this way. It doesn't have a queen. It doesn't have a king. It doesn't have some kind of symbolic figure to unite the country. So these things get attached and the roles are conflated. That is true. But rather than rail against it, we have to understand it. We have to be able to see how it works. Otherwise, we are just caught flat-footed, not understanding what's going on.
So Michael Tracy, I don't know, because sometimes he comes across as a cynic, but I think at heart he wants to believe. So he tweeted out this on yesterday, I think it was. Congrats to Democratic donors and insider hacks for officially proving that presidential primary elections are fake. Michael is upset.
Well, it's always a question of what can you legitimate, right?
Yeah.
And the reason that the Republicans lined up behind Trump is that they couldn't legitimate doing anything else.
Yeah.
They didn't have any other option. They wanted something else, to be sure, but they didn't come together early enough to be able to legitimate a different option. And the same thing was the case here. For the Democrats to get Biden out, it was just a question of them uniting at an early enough point to be able to do that. And people like me said, that's not going to happen. They're going to fight with each other and it's not going to work out. In the Republican case, Jeb and Marco Rubio and Chris Christie and John Kasich, they all stayed in the race for way too long. They didn't coordinate their dropouts in the way that they needed to prevent Trump from getting the nomination. If they'd coordinated their dropouts, they might well have been able to beat him if they'd done that at an early enough stage. So it's not that the primaries are real or fake. This is. Oh,
sorry.
Am I back in?
Sorry.
Okay.
You're back. Sorry.
This is a process that you can manipulate
Freudian.
to legitimate what you want to do. But to do it, you need to act with sufficient coordination. And coordination problems are common in institutions and organizations that are large, that have multiple power centers. And both the Republican and Democratic parties fit that description. They have multiple power centers, and coordination is an issue. The thing that wowed me was the level of coordination the Democrats achieved in this case and the speed with which they achieved this level of coordination. You had people who have been on opposite sides, different sides of many internal disputes within the Democratic Party, coming together to overcome Biden in a blitz, and a media blitz. And they not only coordinated politically, the political operatives, the elites in the party, they used all of their connections in the media. They got all of these journalists on their side, and they were just dripping stories to the point where people think there has to be a mastermind behind it because the level of coordination was so good. But they didn't do this until after the debate, because prior to the debate, there wasn't that level of coordination or agreement about the condition of Biden. It was the debate and the events after the debate that generated that consensus. So now the question is can that consensus hold through the convention, or will it splinter? And it might splinter because human beings are, really difficult to coordinate. We are opinionated, grumpy people, and we're getting more opinionated and grumpy over time. We don't like to be told what to do. We get snarky. So we may get snarky, especially if Harris, proves to be as bad as I think she is.
Well, and another thing is it shows that when that all the BS, when they try to make up all these reasons why they can't do something like the parliamentarian, or so they don't have one more vote. It's like you can see that if they really want to do something, they can make things happen.
Or in the case of John McCain with the repeal and replace, when John McCain said no and thumbs down it, and the Republicans said, "Oh, John McCain said no, so we can't get rid of Obamacare. Sorry." And then that went away, and they've never tried to do it again since, even though John McCain is gone.
Yeah. Hi, Zuleika. She's one of my, she's a contributor. Hi. she has to have her Twitter on lockdown though, because people come for her for some reason, but she's very nice. So every once in a while I try to help her out, or maybe no, or maybe I just found the flame. I try to deflect some of the heat from her. It's like, come after me. Anyway, thanks for tuning in. Yeah, I mean, it's just it's amazing what they can do, and then people will memory hole that. It's like, well, but I guess when it's existential, like what was going on there.
What is existential? It's always something that has to be negotiated, and it's always something that's up for debate in each instance. And sometimes the parties will look really coordinated, and other times they won't. And it depends on whether this level of agreement can be generated. This is a political process. It's not a conspiracy. It's a political
these four
process.
these four ladies though seem to be still very sad. I think, and I can only watch so much MSNBC. I
can't watch any. I never watch any MSNBC.
I used to watch a bit of Morning Joe. because I just kind of just to get an idea of what people like. I think Max Blumenfeld says that, just get an idea of what they want us to think, or what the kind of stories, because it's also presented like, this is the go-to table if you want to know what's going on in politics. And blah, blah, blah.
I stay away from
like,
TV news because it's all written for septuagenarians.
Yeah.
It's all
yeah.
and the median viewer of all the TV news at this point is between the ages of 65 and 70. It's an increasingly irrelevant demographic, and the television news is increasingly irrelevant to what happens.
Yeah, but even so, Maddow does get 100,000 per episode, I think, or 150,000. I don't know what she gets.
Yes, but it's a very predictable aging demographic. It's not something where there's a whole lot of sparkle about what's going to happen.
No, I'm not disputing that, but I'm just thinking it's interesting that for some reason these four figures, these people have never. I mean, I don't know what they say in private, but from the beginning, they've been trying to just really stay on that Biden train, and very, and Van Jones was practically crying, or maybe he was crying yesterday. I don't know. I'm like, he's really maybe. And then I thought, well, maybe I'm being cynical. Maybe he really does love Joe Biden. Maybe Van Jones really loves Joe Biden. But
there is a Biden camp. It's just that the Biden camp, parts of it were continuously shaved off over the previas 3 weeks. And there's still something left of it. There were still people who thought he should stay
but tears, Van Jones crying. It's not like he owes his whole life to Joe Biden or something.
Oh, I've heard about lots of people crying. Even people who don't like Joe Biden. There's something about the betrayal element here that makes people upset. And there's something about the agedness and the decrepitness that's very sad. Very sad.
Yeah.
There's a British sensibility that says, well, he's the prime minister. He spent his whole life grasping after power. He gets what he deserves. But that's not how Americans tend to think about their presidents. The president is a very emotional position for many people. Not for me, but for many people.
Yeah. No, I mean, obviously we see that, and we see that on both sides. It's not like you could accuse Trump supporters of not having a powerful connection to their candidate.
Right. And you can sit here and say, Americans shouldn't be like this. But, it's a political fact. It's one of the things we have to work with. And it means that it's one of the reasons why it's hard to get rid of an incumbent president. It's hard to stop an incumbent president from being the nominee. If the incumbent wants to run, there's a betrayal element in stopping the incumbent from running that obstructs that. It's very difficult. In fact, I will say declaratively, it's never been done. Nobody has ever defeated an incumbent presidential candidate in a primary. The incumbent president has never been driven from the race by the primary result. Never happened. Not once. There have been some reasonably competitive primaries. I remember when Ford was running for the nomination in 76 as the incumbent president, Reagan ran a reasonably competitive primary against him. But even in that case, it was something like 60-40 in favor of Ford. And Ford was not elected. Ford was not even originally elected as the VP for Nixon. He was not popular. It was clear that Ford was probably going to lose in 76, and they still couldn't get rid of him because he's the sitting president of the United States.
Yeah.
And I thought it would go like that. I thought, he may be dead in the water like Jerry Ford in 76, but I thought that he would still be in. So I was surprised. But let's see if they can keep this level of coordination together from here on out.
Yeah.
Let's see.
Well, who knows
if Harris makes that easy for them or hard.
Yeah. And who knows what kind of, we don't know what kind of horse trading was going on. Although the Game of Thrones, Democrat Game of Thrones, does provide for nice schadenfreude and nice tweets. So Wyatt Reed, I think he writes for the Gray Zone. And he wrote, breaking, with Joe Biden officially out, Juan Guaido has now declared himself the Democratic nominee for U.S. president. I thought this is pretty funny. As I recall, this is the guy who they tried to make into the president of Venezuela a few years ago. Maybe that was during the Trump administration. And it was just like, it just seemed like this weird... Like, who is this guy?
They tried to call him the president until he became the president. Yeah. But they weren't actually in a strong enough material position within Venezuela to make it happen. So
and Maduro had won the election. Yeah. So it was just.
There's all sorts of disputes about Venezuelan elections, but there's still a fundamental question, regardless of whether you think the election was fair or not fair. If somebody orders the troops to do something, who do they obey?
Yeah.
Who's got the legitimacy with the army, who's able to ultimately control the instruments of the state. And it was not Juan Guaido.
No, that was, so it seemed like a really weird pick. So it's like, and people were like, okay, this is another example of the CIA really being off their game or something. And CIA is a code for the variety of 3-letter institutions that would have been possibly
they have a hard time sometimes.
Involved.
Sometimes they screw stuff up. I mean, they thought that we'd be greeted as liberators in Iraq and that it would spark a series of color revolutions in the Middle East. They don't always know what they're talking about.
Yeah. And someone also posted this, having outlasted several U.S. presidents who have tried to kill him, Bashar al-Assad will now become the president of the United States. No one kicked him out. I like that one. And there's others like this, as you can imagine. So the comedy has been pretty good. I don't know if you have anything to say about that. I think it kind of speaks for itself.
It was in part because of the character of the opposition to Assad that he's managed to stick around. When it became clear that the strongest rebel group was the Islamic State, that generated a willingness to tolerate Assad.
Yeah. So anyway, I'm kind of I think I meant to put those at the end and then I didn't. It was kind of funny. Michael Tracy again. He's a good follow. So he's upset. Kamala received 0 delegates in 2020, muscled her way to VP through the insider machinations, received 0 delegates in 2024. Now muscling her way. I wonder if it's she's muscling her way or she's allowing others to muscle their way for her. I don't know. Way to presidential nomination through insider machinations. Owes her entire ascendance to Democratic Party at least, as opposed to voters.
Well, she wouldn't be in position to be tapped for this if she wasn't the VP. And they had to vote for Biden despite her.
Yeah.
So clearly she wasn't a big enough liability to stop Biden from winning. But the way that Biden made that work was by keeping her out of the press as much as possible. It's much harder to do that when you're top of the ticket.
Yeah.
You know, Trump made the point about Biden winning because he was hiding in a basement. This election, you can't hide in a basement. It's not a COVID election. So I think it's going to be...
Well, she could get long COVID.
People aren't going to buy that at this point. The only people who would buy that are people who would vote for her in any case. At this point, COVID in the States is really a non-issue for most people.
Yeah, I know.
Aside from a small contingent of diehards.
Yeah. Okay, so let's see. I want to go through these really quick before you have to take off. So Max Blumenthal, let's see what he has to say. Biden did not announce his withdrawal from the campaign in a televised, semi-statesman-like speech, but through a tweet with a digitally generated signature on Elon's X. This was not only a flagrant insult to the American public, it was the latest act in the coup that is playing out before our eyes while we're told democracy is on the ballot.
Well, what, does he think that the president has to appear on television? Why should the president have to appear on television? Television is going extinct just like the newspaper. Why should he have to appear on television? What does television have over the internet, apart from it's been around? I think that the people who think that television is serious and the internet isn't are not with the times.
Yeah, that maybe hasn't had the gravitas or something. So Glenn, who does not believe that that journalists should not be held to account in a public way, he's been having a fun time. I don't know if you follow Glenn Greenwald or not, but he's been having quite the time responding to press tweets and whatnot. So Robert Costa.
That reminds me of that tweet there, cowardly leaking DC sewer rats. Don't let them get their way. It reminds me of the JoJo Siwa song, Boomerang.
Yeah.
Don't let those haters get their way. I'm going to come back like a boomerang. That's the level of discourse we're operating at here.
Yeah. So this is Robert Costa. I think he's one of, I know who he is. He's kind of on the MSNBC circuit, Bill Maher show circuit. President Biden is deeply frustrated in Delaware this week with those he perceives as unhelpful. Calm down, Robert. To those he perceives, well, he's trying to be, have
those
some.
He perceives as unhelpful.
Yes, unhelpful, and who he believes are participating in an informal, somewhat slow-moving, misguided revolt against his campaign. That's the last word.
Somewhat slow-moving.
Yeah. And Glenn Greenwald's like, stay strong, Joe. Don't let those anonymous, cowardly, leaking DC sewer rats get their way. But Glenn doesn't like this stuff. I watched his, how was it, yesterday or something? And he was saying, he goes, why? Because he was saying, well, it used to be that journalists, yeah, you'd give anonymity, but you wouldn't just give anybody anonymity. So it was like a whistleblower, if there was a good reason to leave out the source's name. But this idea that all these representatives and other high ups in Washington can just, call their favorite or text somebody a bit, and they'll just totally let them do it without name recognition or putting their name on it. Glenn is upset.
Yeah, these guys are diehards for a form of journalism, form of media that no longer fits material conditions and therefore can no longer exist, which is given the direction of things, it's a reactionary impulse to try to reclaim a version of the culture, a version of the media ecosystem that no longer exists, and it's just out of touch. And it's only getting more out of touch over time. And that's not to say that there weren't certain things about that media environment that may have been preferable to ours. There may be all sorts of things, but the economic conditions, the material conditions, the technological media environment that used to sustain all of that is gone. When these people are doing old man yells at void.
Yeah. But still, there is something, I still think that I would take Glenn's point, though, is that why do they let anybody? It's like, if, I don't know, I guess they're meaning, maybe we're just in this lag where our concepts and our norms haven't caught up to the changes. So this idea that a journalist,
younger people have concepts and norms that have caught up, but older people who want to write for newspapers or be on TV because they want the 70s back, those people are out of touch. But they're bigger than younger people. They have larger platforms because they've been around longer, so they can continue to say things that don't match conditions.
Yeah, but what I'm asking is, you're saying that it's not that you think it's not a big deal that people who are journalists will leak like a sieve for elected officials.
It's not a question of whether it's a big deal. It's just a fact. This is
but I mean, like, your point. Do you think it's probably? Do you think it's corrosive to media, to the press, or at least what we used to think of the press?
I think it already has corroded the press. The press as it used to exist is gone. That's already gone.
No.
There's nothing to save there. It's dead. That version of the media is dead. And it will never come back. It is completely gone. And all we have now are people who used to work in it, who remember how it used to work, and who miss it. But it will never come back.
Things always come back. Trad is rad.
Journalistic quixotism.
Yeah, but trad is rad. Trad wife is now, trad used to be bad, and now the trad wife is rad. So things do
But the material conditions for widespread trad wifery are gone, right? To have a parent who stays home, you would need the income of the parent who works to be large enough to materially sustain that, which it's not.
For the vast, but that doesn't mean it's not being presented as rad.
Yeah, but that's just cultural froth. It doesn't touch anything. It's just a way of avoiding the reality of the situation, which is what Glenn Greenwald is doing there.
Well, I don't know about that. I mean, I would say that, I mean, what's going to come, how the quote unquote press, now it's usually just say media now. Yeah, so we even say really the press anymore, but the media, and I guess how you're going to, so I think that, I take your point that when you don't have these large institutions that are the main source of the quote unquote news, the newspapers and the magazines and a few TV channels, that you don't have this centralized kind of command and control or whatever that you're going to have. And now that anybody can come on and do what we're doing and say what we want, and and I also would say,
and what's left of them, by the way. Insofar as they still exist, they exist because they have close personal relationships with elites and with the establishment. And the only advantage they have is access to those people and the ability to publish what those people say, right? And because that's all they have to do that on whatever terms those elites and establishment figures demand. They have no leverage because those people can just go to Twitter and post on Twitter. They don't have to give these people anything. They don't have to give them anything. It's made the journalists slaves of them. They depend on them. That's why I said journalism is a degree in being a slave. It is no longer what people think it is.
Okay. No, I see what you're. I see. Yeah. Again, my whole point was a smaller one that I think that it's odd. This thing about why would you let everybody? Why why all of a sudden it used to be like a rare thing that a source would be anonymous, and now everybody's anonymous. But I see what you're saying about the material constraints. That if they were to maintain these standards, then why would these people go to them? They could just go around them and have use chat GPT and a bit of a graphic and go direct to the people like Trump did for a while.
Trump proved it. Trump proved it works. You can win by telling them all to go fuck themselves. Trump proved it.
Yeah.
It can be done.
Yeah. Yeah. So there you go. Anyway, see another look, let's see what else we have here from Marx Engels Lenin Institute. I wanted to put him up here. He's going to be on that's a good tomorrow. I'm doing a live stream at noon on how the left was tranced, and Marx and Alexander McKay, the head of the Marx Engels Lenin Institute, is going to be on that. We're going to talk about it in terms of how it is, and in particular that quote unquote Marxist organizations on the left seem to swallow the entirety of gender ideology whole, and see what kind of we're going to talk about what to make of how that happened and why that happened, and how to what to think about that and what to do about it to the extent we can. That's a plug for tomorrow at noon UK time. So he said, now watch as the absurd nodding dogs of Europe try to pay tribute to Biden, who has just admitted that he's too ill to run again. A week ago, these clowns were all saying how he was a picture of health. Nothing they tell us is the truth. They lie constantly. They do so about things that affect us every day, and they tell even bigger lies about things that happen on the other side of the world. We must not believe any of this curated fake reality presented to us by bourgeois propagandists anymore.
It's much worse than that. Nobody knows what the truth is.
Yeah, and he's a Brit.
Nobody
so
can figure it out.
Alexander
we have no way of adjudicating it.
Yeah. Go ahead.
We have no common epistemology. We have no way of adjudicating what's true and what's not that we all agree to or all assent to. Pluralism has penetrated epistemology. It's penetrated knowledge production. It's penetrated science. It's penetrated journalism. There is no way of adjudicating the facts anymore. And increasingly, people can make videos that aren't real. They can do audio that's not real. They can call you on the phone and have a machine impersonate a loved one of yours and convince you that that person is in terrible trouble and that you have to give them money. So you can't trust audio material. You can't trust visual material. You can't trust anything. And even the institutions no longer are independent to the degree that they used to be. All we have is agonism, internal conflict within the structures themselves. And we can watch that agonism and we can try to see where it might be going. But to choose sides in it all the time is a little bit naive. To go, oh, they're not telling the truth, but these people are. Well, how do you know? How does anybody know?
I know. I'm not going to bring you into this. I don't expect you to answer it, but I know what a woman is. And that 2 + 2 is 4, and that Joe Biden is senile. I just said that because to plug for tomorrow, that materialists would dispute that, but I don't want to get off track.
There's only a small part of material reality that each of us actually can touch. Touch grass. Well, which grass and where? Right? We each have a role in society that gives us access to certain facts about it, but hides from us other facts, right? And we can only get these other facts in a mediated way by talking to other people and engaging in social relations with them, right? So they try to tell us about it, and sometimes they're inarticulate, and sometimes they lie, and sometimes we misunderstand them, and sometimes all three at once. And sometimes they're lying to themselves before they even tell us. So they think they're telling the truth, but they're not really. And all of these communication problems happen all the time between finite bodies stuck in the material world. So it's not like we all share some experience straightforwardly that we can all appeal to. I mean, yes, there are certain aspects of being human that are fairly universal, but you can't get very far in politics by directly appealing to them all the time.
No, for sure. But I like that's an interesting way of putting it, that pluralism has invaded epistemology. Is that a Studebaker-ism, or is that somebody else came up with that? turn of phrase.
In my book that's coming out in November, I talk about deep pluralism as something which happens in embedded democracies. When democracies stick around for a long period of time and the possibility of revolution drops out, now you can have greater disagreement, deeper disagreement than before, because it can't produce revolutionary violence or civil conflict, which would resolve it in one way or another. So you're able to get spiraling disagreement that goes down into domains, and that's the deep aspect to it. It goes down deep into the foundation and roots of things. And so it's not like the postmodernists are right when they say that, you know, this disagreement is necessarily the human condition, and it's transhistorical, and everything else, any attempt to get past it or get around it is a collusion. I'm not making a postmodernist argument. I'm saying that in our historical situation, our material situation, there are certain reasons why we cannot come to consensus about things anymore in the way that we used to be able to do. We're able to do in other situations. This is a fact about material reality that the people who are railing against, why don't people tell the truth? Why don't people do things like they did in the 70s, are not grasping. They're missing how things have changed over the last 50 years. They don't get it.
Yeah. Oop, sorry. Although I'm very proud of that. I want to pop him up. Yeah. Well, and I'm very I don't want to get too far off topic, but I do want to plug the stream. I'm very happy that Alexander's agreed to come on, because I'm also one of the things that I'm trying to add to this the gender ideology beta, the sex gender struggle thing that's not just rehashing, as I'm playing around with the transgenderism is the vanishing mediator, or no, wait, was it? Why am I phrasing it? Transgenderism is transhumanism's vanishing mediator. So I'm using, I guess it would be Jameson, but also Zizek's notion of the vanishing media and the three things. It's intermediation, it's the transition phase, and it kind of diminishes and goes off into the background. And I'm applying that to a journalist who's one of the only people who's focused on the kind of the medical industrial complex aspect of all this, and the people pushing that. So anyway, so it ties into the idea that, like, you know, how is it that this ideology or this, you know, transgenderism kind of just kind of plowed through all these institutions, and to get at it beyond the fact that people are just being nice, or it was just the next step on the civil rights thing, or you have NGOs that didn't want to go out of business, so you have to keep on finding other people to fight for, or, you know, whatever it is. And also, you know, and so I thought to trying to get at it at a deeper level. And he's one of the few Marxist organizations I've seen who actually takes a stand. Every once in a while, he will tweet something like, "Okay, it's time for me to tweet out again how how we're not a postmodern institution, we're not this or that, and, you know, the difference between ideological and the material and whatnot." So I'm very excited about that and to get his take on it. So it's not just for those of you out there who want to dig deeper into how I say this. I like to use the word genderborged, how so many institutions, especially Marxist institutions, seem to have been genderborged so quickly. And how, for example, to the point of when I ask, I got into sometimes I'll get into a conversation on Twitter with someone who's saying, like, they're a hardcore Marxist, yeah? And I'll be like, well, how is it that everybody missed what you could legitimately call the proletarianization of sex, like physical sex, the boundary between men and women, and sexual and reproduction, and the commodification of it, and the, you know, more genders, more money, and all that stuff? How did that get completely missed from quote unquote Marxists? And they look at you like, well, Marx didn't say anything about that in Volume 1, so you can't use these terms in this way. And I'm just kind of like, you know, I'm just like, has nobody, because it just seems like it's right there. It's like, no, proletarianization was only about the peasants in the land. Well, that was the first main one, yeah, but it's not like it stopped there. But anyway, I don't want to get off too much, but I'm just very excited that I found someone like Alexander who's interested in coming on and having this type of conversation about this phenomena, and getting it kind of out of the, you know, like type of stuff. But anyway, I want to let's see, before you go, yeah, so Game of Thrones, you think, if I understood you correctly, your assessment is that this may not be as exciting as we think it could be. So so while I had lots of fun with my Game of Thrones theme theme packaging of our discussion, that unless Kamala really face plans, which you have said before, given which is a clip I also want to bring out of the last episode we did together that I just didn't have time because then this happened, because she's really not a good candidate. But if somehow they're able to get through that and get through the convention, that you think that there's unlikely to be a Game of Thrones situation. So we're unlikely. So it will be Queen Kamala Cersei, first of her name, at least in terms of being the presidential candidate.
I think that she will probably be the nominee because of the money, unless something happens between now and then to cause the delegates to splinter in such a way that they can't be massaged back together. The goal of the party elites will be to stop that from happening, because if the delegates all start, they may have some opposition, they may have somebody else in the convention so that it appears that there's some level of contestation, but they don't want many votes at the convention where the whole thing becomes a media circus because day after day after day there's still no white puff of smoke. They don't want that. The only person who might benefit from that would be maybe Hillary Clinton.
Okay,
but I don't even think she entertains the hope at this point. I think she knows she's done.
I don't know if, I mean, this is Kurt Metzger. He is a comedian. He's on he's like the Ed McMahon to he's like Jimmy Dore's Ed McMahon, but more not suitable for work. And he put out this. I don't know if you want to, if there's anything interesting to say, but I thought it was kind of funny. So Kurt Metzger wrote yesterday, or tweeted yesterday, the pre-assassination attempt, Trump stock short seller is Austin Private Wealth LLC. Don't know who that is. Wealthy client holdings include BlackRock, Vanguard, the Rothschild blank family, George Worthless Bush, Dick Cheney, and his homunculus blank daughter. Without commenting on some of the more specific characterizations of Dick Cheney's daughter, have you heard anything about this Austin Private Wealth thing and Trump?
That sounds to me like a conspiracy theory. I don't go in for that kind of stuff. I think that's just a conspiracy theory.
I was like, what? I mean, I'm like, who knows, yo? And also, what do you think Obama's play is? Because I guess because he's not what they're trying to say now, at least this is just for the last day, so who knows, is that he doesn't want to back Kamala. And for example, for your thing, even let's say this is true, that he really, for whatever reason, doesn't want to back Kamala, what really can he do about it? Is he
he has to find somebody else to put up against her. That would be the thing. He would have to start splintering the delegates. He would he'd need to get people to start coming out publicly or mediated through the press for other people apart from her. There would need to be negative stories about her to create adequate disagreement. He could gin up disagreement if he's bent on doing that. That would be, if he's already from the beginning thinking that way, then you would get a contested convention out of that. If he's committed to it and there are other people around him that agree with his point of view. This is something that I think has to be revealed over the coming days. I took it as a sign, since Biden endorsed Harris, that the party is unified around Harris. But if that's not the case, then it's going to turn into a huge mess, a huge, giant mess. And there's no telling who will come out on top.
And then we'll have a serious Game of Thrones.
It all depends on whether they can stay united. This group of people all agreed that Biden was senile, but do they all agree that Harris should be the nominee? We're about to find out.
Yeah, so we'll see. And not that, not that I want it to, blood to spill on the streets over the DNC convention, but I will see, because I was really thinking, like, and then like you said, I mean, I also can get if you see things enough times and people seem to be saying it with confidence, you're like, oh, maybe there's something there. So this was one stream online yesterday, was about Hillary, like, what's Hillary thinking? Hillary's this, Hillary's that, Hillary's gonna and also Kim Iverson was like, well, she's really the best candidate they would have, and this and that. And I started thinking, like, am I really gonna have this? And then I thought, well, that would actually be entertaining if I had to pick which person from the DNC stable, so to speak, for Trump to go against. I think that would just as an entertainment level in Jersey. Not that it would be good for the the country or politics, I think much. But
I really hope they're ready in Chicago, because this could go really badly, depending on if they don't have adequate level of unity before Chicago. It could get really bad. It did in 68 in Chicago. It was in Chicago that rioting happened in 68. In Chicago.
You think that could happen? Again, something that not just that it would spill out. It wouldn't just
the reason we introduced this system was to prevent the contested convention and the possibility of major division, which is why some people said this is not wise, because this has the possibility of spilling into something that could end in that.
So you're still
maintaining. The thing about Chicago is that it's right on the border with Indiana. Indiana is awash in guns.
Yeah,
and they are
well, so is Chicago
continuously all the time because of its proximity to Indiana. There is no telling what could happen in Chicago if they go into it divided. It would be very, very, very irresponsible in the Max Weber sense of that term for them to not know how they intend for it to go when they get to Chicago.
But do you think, because we know that they have the capacity to convince themselves of something, so if they're listening to Ryan Grimm and some other people there are people who think that the best thing they could do would be to have an open convention. They think that would be the best thing to do. And you're saying quite obviously that you think these people are high on their own supply, or just thinking about in a very
risky,
abstract, friendly way. You know?
It's risky. If within the first 3 votes you get behind somebody, maybe. But once you start going in there and you don't know how the votes are going to go, and you're
Benjamin,
in your papal Vatican process.
I'm going to pull myself down just for 5 seconds because I got to pull my blind because I'm being blinded by the light. So keep on talking. I'll be back
do that.
In like 5 seconds.
Yeah. No, once that Vatican process gets going, you don't know how long it's going to take. You don't know how far it's going to go. And you can have new fights, new disagreements, and new enmities that break out over the course of it in a totally ad hoc fashion. It's very difficult to control once it actually gets rolling. You don't know how it's going to end. You can't just make everybody get behind something. Once the convention is broken open, it's very hard to get it shut again. So, you could do an open convention if you're reasonably confident that there are not that many choices and that the choices are all good and that people will pick one fairly quickly in a fairly reasonable way. But if that isn't the case, and at 68 it wasn't, you got to remember these elites, they failed at 68 to make it work. We have a precedent for them failing to make it work. They went into a convention with some people who wanted Humphrey, some people who wanted McCarthy, some people who wanted RFK Sr., some people who wanted Wallace. And they could not get those people to agree, so much so that you had rioting from the anti-Vietnam people who wanted McCarthy or RFK, and you had Wallace splintering off and forming a segregationist third-party bid. That was a huge mess with rioting and violence. They got to be really, really careful. The thing that people got to remember about politics is these people are trying to control instruments of incredible violence that can easily get out of hand. You really have to be careful before you start operating this machine in a way that is unpredictable, in terrain that you've not been in territory with which you are not familiar. Weird stuff can happen. And only the oldest people in our politics even have any real memory of what it used to be like. Hillary Clinton was at the 68 Republican convention. She was there for Nelson Rockefeller, who was defeated by Richard Nixon, along with Ronald Reagan, who was also defeated by Richard Nixon. Right? And she cried at the RNC in 68. Real tears.
Yeah.
Because Richard Nixon defeated her pick.
No, I mean,
in this shady process of Republican insiders, old Eisenhower types, stifling the voters. A lot of these people are younger than Hillary Clinton. They have no memory of it. She was in college, I think, at the time. She was very young. Most people have no idea how crazy it can get.
Yeah. No, and I mean, I just because once we had that conversation, it was the first time we talked. So that was the first time you were on the podcast, and so now whenever I hear someone or see something about someone singing the praises and saying they should just have an open convention, I'm like, oh, I don't know, man. You got to weigh those things.
It's risky.
Since I think if you're up to it, because I think we've said all we can say about this right now. We'll see if it's a Game of Thrones that wasn't, or if that's already happened. So it's just the old man got pushed out, and now the heir apparent is there. And even though
see if they can keep a lid on it,
even though
keep
Obama,
everybody behind Dan Quayle, see how that works.
Yeah, and even if everybody is except because the Clintons have come out officially and endorsed Kamala, which doesn't mean there couldn't be some sort of, that she isn't secretly hoping that.
Your goal, if you do get picked at the convention, is to look reluctant. You're only doing this because you absolutely have to. You've been chosen as the last resort to bring order to the chaos.
Yeah. Well, no, people were saying, and I guess again, that's when you can't the naivete, when you're only seeing text and you don't have the other stuff. No, she endorsed her, and I'm like, and. Of course, but I mean, if you think about it, that's the best play. Either way, that's the best play. Yeah. So, we'll see. We'll see.
I don't think it will be Hillary Clinton, but I'm not 100% sure.
Well, I'm not going to delete that graphic because I may need to use it again.
I am about as sure as I can be of anything in American politics that Kamala Harris will not be president of the United States.
I don't. Yeah, no. I think that would really be unless they really start quote unquote rigging the election in a serious I don't know.
I just can't fathom it. I can't imagine it actually happening.
Yeah.
So many things have to happen for her to. Her being the candidate, I can believe might happen, but her actually winning is just beyond thinkable for me. I can't imagine it actually happening.
If you think that if she is, because I think if Biden had stayed in the race, there'd have been no reason for Trump to do another debate. He would have just let that debate. I don't know. I have my blind down, but apparently the sun's so powerful now.
He might have done it as a reminder. He might have liked it as a potential reminder of his inadequacies. I think there was more risk in another debate for Biden than for Trump.
Okay, but do you think he would be gung ho to debate Kamala? Because he doesn't have to do the debates. Yeah, that's an option. He can say.
We have to see how the polling shakes, because initially Kamala Harris's polling will be high, because initially the Democrats will be thinking about her as a theoretical figure.
They'll be
so
she'll
poll higher than she'll end up eventually polling. So we're going to see probably at the convention she'll get a little bump, and then maybe around September, I think the numbers will start to come down. I think they'll start to come down hard.
I've never had this problem before. Sorry.
Yeah, that's if she makes it to September. She's got to make it that far.
Cloud. Yeah. I would like to, since the last time you were on, we kind of gotten on a tangent, a really good tangent. Actually, I got some feedback on the back and forth that you and I had about the Nina Power cancellation and your position on it. I've gotten some positive feedback on that.
Good.
But it did take away. We didn't get a chance to talk about France and Nigel Farage. Do you have 10 minutes? Could we give Nigel a bit of love and the French a bit of love? Okay.
Sure. Let's talk about the Euros.
Okay, and I can always at some point the next phase in my podcast journey is to figure out how to cut and splice videos.
You'll get there.
Baby steps. All right. So the last time you were nice enough to explain Peter Hitchens' critique to me. I understood Peter Hitchens' critique of Farage. And he was basically, he got on and for those of you out there, one of my guilty pleasures is reading Peter Hitchens' tweet X exchanges, and he's one of these cool dudes. He'll get in a tangle with someone with like 2 followers, 5 followers, or some big name person. He just, he always quote tweets though. He never replies. He always quote tweets, so it's fun. But he was saying things, and it wasn't the labor people who came after him, which makes sense because, but the people who were really about a reform are coming after him. And he was just basically like, they're not a conservative party. They're just radical nationalists or something like that. I can't remember. And he's a fraud, and people are really upset at him for
They're
not loving
Americanizers. They want to
not loving
Americanize the
Nigel,
country.
not loving
Yeah.
Nigel. They were coming after Peter. So, but I understood that. I understood why people would be upset with that. I understood his comments. I understood Peter Hitchens' commentary on the Reform Party. But when he started to go all in on how Keir Starmer was some sort of long con, hyper radical Trotskyist, and it was super dangerous and made Jeremy Corbyn look like Tony Blair, and I was just like, did you actually?
He's opposed to the whole 20th century.
Yeah. But we did squeeze in Benjamin's take on that, and so I appreciate that. But we didn't have a chance to get your take on Farage at all. And this is a fantastic, iconic photo, I think. He was campaigning, and this young woman just went up to him and threw her McDonald's milkshake at him. And someone caught this picture. But he did win. He did win his election there. So,
well, my line about Farage is that they should have called it the UK Dependence Party, because they are for dependence on the United States. They want to Americanize the country. They want to Americanize the healthcare system. They want to deregulate the hell out of it. Their goal is to turn the UK into the United States. If they could, they'd probably make it a US state. That's what they're really bent on doing in the long term. They have you can't actually run a, Brexit in one country kind of economic model. It wouldn't make any sense. Your choice is to either continue to have very open trade and flows with the European Union or to pursue very open trade and flows with the United States. You have to join one of these blocks. And it's really a question of EU versus US. And the chimera of some kind of independent, authentically British thing is based on false memories of some possibility of a British empire that are dead and are fictitious. And the people who are really, serious people related to reform, the Reform Party, they understand this. Their goal is to Americanize the country as an alternative to Europeanizing it. But nobody in the UK has a plan to resist both of those things at the same time. That's something that a lot of ordinary people in the UK want. They'd like to neither Americanize the country nor Europeanize it. But there's no actual way of doing that. Ultimately, that is the choice. And that's unfortunate, but that's what happens when your country declines and you become a weak, middling power.
Yeah. Okay. So Panama White Vis. Hello. Hi. I thought maybe we said something to get somebody riled up, but welcome. Thank you. And we like the comments, and I try to keep an eye out for them, but I am a one-woman show behind the scenes here, but I do my best. Okay. Yeah. I don't have anything to add to that. I think that, it did show again how crazy the electoral system is in the UK. That they got 14% of the vote, but 4 seats. So 14%.
It prioritizes strong government. That system is designed to give you a strong government, even if you have a divided society. It prioritizes stability over being representative. A lot of people assume democracy must always prioritize being representative, or that's the essence of what democracy is. Democracy is a set of institutions for making decisions, and it needs to be optimized not just for abstract values, but also for issuing decisions. That's a very important thing that a political system needs to do. First past the post has always centered that, and that's why that system has lasted longer institutionally than many other electoral systems in many other countries. It prioritizes stability over any kind of principle that might be an alternative to that. It's very order oriented.
Yeah. So I think this is one of the things that I like about Benjamin is that you're kind of you really appreciate the notion of Chesterton's fence, yeah. And if I understand that, but it's this the idea that if there is something that's been there for a while, even if it's causing us problems or we don't like it, it's worthwhile to think about why it's there in the first place and what it does. So it sounded to me like you'd be saying that you would be against going to all this ranked choice voting and different things, and I mean, or or is that not what you're saying?
Well, you have to be aware of what it would do. You have to be able to think through all of that. A lot of people think, if you just did PR or something, it would help you out. But I mentioned this on the show the other day. I talked to this former congressman who said what the United States really needs is electoral reform, so that there can be more parties, and then all the parties should be full of rich people money, so that you'll have more flavors of the same ice cream, and then people will be entertained by that.
Yeah.
And they will allow neoliberalism to continue unabated. There is absolutely no reason to think that something like PR, single transferable vote, necessarily will give you any advantage in our present circumstance. In the time when those systems were used to produce coalitions for doing social democratic reform, it was left-wing parties in coalition with Christian democratic parties. You'd never get that kind of coalition now. And if you did get that kind of coalition, it would be overseeing slow-paced austerity rather than social democratic reform, as we've seen in Germany. When the SDP and the CDU get together, they do slow walk austerity. They don't do the kinds of reforms that kind of coalition might have been associated with in the 50s and 60s. And that's because of neoliberalism and capital mobility and things that have fundamentally changed about the material conditions. The electoral system can't solve all of those problems for you. And you got to bear in mind, the weakness of all of those systems is that they produce conditions of ungovernability, right? Where all of the parties can't actually form a stable coalition. You're just having election, and you keep getting results that are unstable and dysfunctional. Now, if you are in a strong position to stage a successful revolution for your own politics in the chaos, you might go, oh yeah, let's generate chaos so we can have an objective revolutionary situation. But if you're not in a good position, and indeed if the right is in a stronger position than you, then such a situation will facilitate authoritarian outcomes. So you can, out of a desire to advance democratic values as you understand them, pursue proportional representation, create a crisis of immobilism that then leads the state to develop in a more right-wing direction. I could give you the example of Nazi Germany, but that is a rather extreme example. How about a less extreme example, which is the French Fourth Republic? Right, the French Fourth Republic, which was a system that ran on proportional representation, produced a crisis of immobilism. Now, some people are nostalgic. They go, oh, but the Parti Communiste Français, they used to win elections. They used to do well in that system. Yes, but they couldn't form stable governing coalitions. Or they go, stuff like the Popular Front earlier on in the 30s. Wasn't that an opportunity for the left? But they couldn't form stable governing coalitions. So what happened? De Gaulle is what happened. De Gaulle is what proportional representation actually gave France. Gaullism and the Fifth Republic. And all of these people hate the Fifth Republic. It was PR that gave you the conditions for the Fifth Republic. It was because PR was such a mess in the Fourth Republic that people would go for the Fifth just to have order. And the thing people need to remember is that order and peace and prosperity are important values for many people in society. People care about these basic, what are the conditions and are they favorable to me staying alive and keeping my house and not getting killed? These things matter politically. You can't discount them. You might go, they're a bunch of Habesian cowards who
are talking about abolishing stuff willy-nilly.
The abolish the police people, totally overlook this. There is a lot of people in society who will not support somebody who insists lexically that representation, equality, and liberty have to be taken more seriously than peace, prosperity, and order. You're not going to be able to win politically by saying, I only care about liberty, equality, representation, and I don't care about peace, prosperity, and order.
Yeah. Well, that's another group that doesn't like me, or at least they don't like me online. Or, I mean, not that a few of them, because what I know from people who actually looked into this is that the people who tend to say abolish the police aren't people who have ever find themselves as of yet in the need of the police. And those people are making the claims for, if you actually go and talk to the high crime neighborhoods or areas, they don't want the police to be abolished. They want better policing. They don't want, crazy cops or racist cops or touchy-feely cops or any of that. But they don't want no cops.
and even if they are sincere,
especially women, and especially older, the people there, they don't want that. So it's like, and so the idea, and then people say, well, no, they didn't really mean that. What they really meant was just, reform. I go, if you mean reform the police, you shouldn't say abolish it. That is a bad That's bad.
Many of them
political
really meant
communication.
privatize. Many of them really meant privatize the police,
So,
destroy the police unions, and
yeah,
marketize policing. That's what
yeah.
many of them actually meant.
Mm,
But there are a fair chunk of anarchists who are sincere in what they believe. What they should bear in mind is that sincere anarchism will often give rise to a level of disorder that will provoke a demand for someone to oppose order at whatever ultimate
yeah,
price, and that
yeah.
despotism comes about precisely because people neglect these values for too long.
And I want to make something very clear. I am not saying that the U.S. political criminal justice system is stellar. Not at all. There's a lot of things, but that's something for another show. But the thing
But we have
about
to be politically,
yeah,
reasonable in the way that we
well,
think.
also
Like
to
we
think
can't
it
just
through.
go, "Oh, I don't like the particular instantiation of order that we have. Therefore, I'm just going to oppose order in general." Right? What we really need to do is to conceptualize order in a more interesting, compelling way, and then think about how we can move from where we are to that other kind of order, which is a complex political process that isn't reducible to, I don't like this, so I reject it. That kind of critiquing that people do, that often it comes from the sociology discipline, this attitude of just critique it, that doesn't allow you to actually move on from it. And if you ever did try to if you ever did try to do a politics that's just negation, what you will end up with is a chaos that will be of benefit to your political rivals. You have to actually have a constructive project. You can't get away from this. And people have to be comfortable with human beings are going to have power dynamics in their relationships. Nobody is going to be able to be totally independent of all of that. We're always going to have a certain amount of interaction that's not totally equal. Not totally equal. We can try to make it equal. We can try to make it just in various ways, but it's not going to be totally equal. So there have to be safeguards. There have to be careful thinking about institutions, careful thinking about how to structure them. And people are produced by institutions. They're produced by social associations. They're produced by state and political entities. These things construct us. They make us what we are. So we can't just act like, we would be who we are in the absence of all of these things, or that people just can raise themselves up out of the ground without other people. And as soon as someone else is involved in raising you, as soon as someone else is teaching you right from wrong, what you can or can't do, as soon as that happens on any level, power dynamics are there. The parental relationship is a power dynamic. Now, some anarchists will tell you even that's unacceptable.
No, we don't do Montessori in my do Montessori in my home. I can tell you that, brother. Anyway,
doesn't work. It doesn't work. It's been proven.
It work with my kids. Yeah, it's all. But I wanted to say something that again, I think, and it might have been you who mentioned this, but this is also about where power is. So it's one thing to say, I don't like this. This is bad. This is wrong. Get rid of this. Get rid of that. But if you're the regime that's responsible for actually governing, then that's a different position. And I think it might have been you that brought up with the Green Party as an example, that they think they want to be in charge, but what you have to do when you're in charge and what you do when you're campaigning, especially if you're not expecting to be responsible for all this stuff, can be very different things. And then I think that's an interesting point. And also to ask people to be like, okay, if whether it be these people that have the great idea to abolish the family or abolish the police or abolish this or abolish that, whatever we want to abolish, is that okay? But then, like you said, you need to think through what the ramifications of that are. And if it's really something that we would benefit from getting rid of, and you think there's a will to get rid of it, or if you need to replace it with something, because just to break gets us to, maybe I think also gets us to what you talked about as the conflation of, how did you put it? You put it nicely, that pluralism has invaded epistemology. And I think when you have all this, negation of this, abolish this, the queering of that, the deconstruction of this, and the mixing and blah, blah, that it just gets like, and then people want to call that freedom or progress. And I'm like, that doesn't seem too free or progressive to me.
A lot of people will just think that other people are crazy. If you create a situation where there's very little agreement about basic things, then people start to appear nuts to one another. And when people start to appear nuts to one another, what do? They go, I'm in a fractious multitude. There is no such thing as society. It's a fractious multitude, a war of all against all that is only kept in check by the strong arm of the state. So when you run in that direction, you ultimately produce a desire for the repressive state, which eventually comes out in the form of a big, sharp pull to the right.
I think, couldn't you call that would be a dialectical reversal, wouldn't it?
Yes, it would.
Yes.
That would be another way of putting it.
I love it when I get it right.
Some people don't know the terminology, right?
No,
some
but
people need it spelled out in concrete terms.
No, please do. That's just for myself to feel good about being self-taught. And some things, no. I do have a PhD, but not in philosophy. Anywho, okay. So before, I don't want not to talk about the French. So let's make sure we do that before
you. Let's do the French.
Really. So let's see. Let me switch my thing so people don't get confused, because they're going to be like, the title is Democratic Game of Thrones, and now we're talking about the French. But people, we gotta go. We're gonna go. So go ahead. And you can start that, and I'm just going to change the thing at the beginning. And I know people, I made a typo. Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So
this idea, that the left front, this popular front is a way to solve anything in France is just very silly, because it's a very unstable coalition of parties that don't all agree. In my book, The Way is Shut, I talk about Mélenchon a bit, and he had this terrible predicament he was in, which is that if he campaigns on withdrawing from the European Union, then he's considered crazy, and the other parties of the left won't work with him. The socialists and the Greens and so on, they won't work with him. But if he drops that commitment and agrees that he will stay in the European Union no matter what happens, then if he ever gets into power, he'll have no credibility with which to demand anything from the Germans and from the other core states. So right now he's in this big coalition, and he's in this coalition because he made the concession. He gave up the unilateral Plan B commitment that he used to have, so that these people would accept him as leader of a coalition. And that's made him temporarily electorally more viable. But it means that if he gets into office at any point, he will either be toothless, or he will have to try to reintroduce the teeth, at which point he will lose the coalition parties that only joined up with him on the premise that he was putting the teeth away.
Okay.
So that's the long-term problem with that whole left formation in France. It's actually a bunch of people who don't agree at all about the future of the country and are just pretending to agree for the purposes of opposing austerity. They have a resistance politics that would collapse if they ever actually got into power. Macron, I think he's really somebody who has been frustrated, because he wants to be the Reagan of France. He wants to transform the French economy. But ever since he lost the legislature, he's had a very difficult time getting things done. So he thought, okay, let me have an election. If I win the election, great. If I lose the election to the right, then I can portray myself as the bulwark against fascism. And that will give me leverage when I negotiate with the left. And initially, most of his campaigning was against the left. What I saw over the course of it, insofar as I saw it, is that he was mainly running against the left to try to reduce the left seat count, because he wanted the right to establish a stronger position so he could position himself as the only one who can credibly protect France from the right. As it happens, the right did not do well enough to fulfill that image either. And he just ended up with the left coalition still in a very strong position. Just like before, he didn't really manage to give himself more options or more flexibility, or even really an opportunity to rebrand the situation in a way that might be more favorable to him. So I don't think it ultimately worked out for him. And I thought maybe it would. I thought maybe the right would gain seats, and he would be able to, even though the center would lose seats, portray himself as the one who protects from the right. But that didn't happen. Instead, the left coalition grew, which is fine and dandy for the left coalition. But I don't think that left coalition can govern France. So I don't see that as ultimately. And this comes back to, and you were right. When you asked in our DMs, you said, when I say that everybody who has something negative to say is right, and everyone who has something positive to say is wrong, am I talking just about the United States, or am I also talking about the UK and France? And I said, well, in the initial conversation when I made that point, I was just talking about the United States. But listening to what I've had to say about the UK and France, I think that probably it does apply to both of them as well.
Well, that'll be another plug for the episode. I did find three or four things just to get people's attention, and I did manage to timestamp them so they can. I can't do everything for them, although I appreciate every single view because we are trying to grow this. Okay, so what about? And wasn't there a thing that there was literally a story? I remember that Marie Le Pen wept. So I'm guessing that maybe after the wave, after the success at the EU elections, EU level elections, maybe they were really believing that this was going to also lead them to, and then Macron called elections.
Yeah.
And he actually, yeah, so he kind of both lost and won, I guess Macron did. And
well, one of the factors in that race was that the election was called very, very quickly. So it became a basic test of party machinery. Who's well organized enough to stage a competitive campaign within less than a month? Who's best prepared? And we found that some of the parties in France were just not on a purely mechanical level ready to do that in that kind of time frame. That there was a blitz aspect to this, which disadvantaged, for instance, the Republicans, the center-right party, which had a split that completely incapacitated their campaign at a very early stage. That's something that could have been worked through if they had a longer period of time to prepare for the election. But Macron was trying to ambush these people. He wanted a very, very rapid-fire campaign so that some of the parties would be caught out flat-footed, not ready to go. And that happened. And so even, it's difficult to draw conclusions from this election about what France wants or where it's going, because the election was held in such a short window of time that it was very much a test of just party organization, who is the best organized apparatus. And Mélenchon was pretty good at the apparatus side of it in that election. The left immediately was a united front, but the only reason that it was is that he had given up on the Plan B stuff. So he gave up on the stick to get that. So he has an electoral advantage, but it comes at the cost of now he's in bed with people he can't rely on if he ever gets into government.
Yeah, so it's so I guess it's a very paper thin or superficial coalition.
That's pop frontism. That's why the Popular Front failed the first time.
Yeah. So if you're enough to get in, but then you can't do anything you want because people can hold that over you, that they'll leave your coalition.
And
there's also a lot of that going on in India,
and coalition-based systems. Defenders of the coalition-based system will go, well, you shouldn't be able to reform the country unless more than half the population want to do it. I have news for them. In any real crisis, more than half the population won't want to do anything.
No.
In a real crisis, you will never get more than half the population understanding the crisis in one way. You need somebody who can impose a minoritarian solution in a crisis. Ideally, that solution is reasonably popular with the public, but
or they can get them on board.
A plurality maybe, but you're not going to get more than half the population voting for major radical change in a crisis. You will just get immobilism. And these people then assume, oh, well, an immobilism will prevail in the streets. No, you won't. In many cases, you won't. We've seen historically that in many, many cases, the left loses in the streets, and it loses at the barricades, and it loses when the tank columns are unleashed. This is not at all a fait accompli for you, getting to a point where there's a crisis of the bourgeois state. It is not an automatic win on any level. You have to actually be organized and prepared for such a situation. And many people are clownish and irresponsible and cavalier in their attitude to this kind of stuff.
All right, so listen to the words of wisdom he's trying to impart on you before you go about on your, anarchic adventures. Be careful what you wish for. You might get it. And then, all right. Well, we have been going for almost 2 hours. Thank you very much. I'm glad that you were able to, that you responded to my DM of like, we have to do the Democratic Game of Thrones.
Well, I had to run last time, and I felt bad about it. So I wanted to come back and finish the job, especially with the news that happened.
Yeah,
I thought let's come back and finish the job.
Yeah, no, I was happy, and I thought, well, if he says yeah, if not, then whatever. Because again, I thought, some things if so much time passes, it's not as fun anymore. I wouldn't have had a good time. I wouldn't have enjoyed my graphics.
Right. It wouldn't have mattered as much. Later on, people would have heard more takes about it, and maybe this will stick out to them because they heard it sooner. But like, guess what? I finished, and you know who didn't? The guy who says, "Guess what?"
And on that note, so we've already wrapped up the Game of Thrones. Seems like maybe the big submission was that they got Biden out.
It's Jover.
Yeah,
just like
it's Jover. Yeah, it's Jover. And Benjamin's prediction is that unless Kamala Harris really face plants and does something really crazy comes out about her, crazy, who knows, that isn't already out already, that she will be the nominee and the Democratic Party will probably stay fairly unified. Barack Obama eventually, maybe while we've been doing this, he's issued a hearty endorsement of her. She'll be the candidate. She won't win unless, again, something really which can happen, black swan events, who knows. That is Benjamin's prediction. So it may not be the most exciting ending. So we might get the Bran ending. We might get a Bran type ending for Game of Thrones. We're not going to get the exciting thing with the. And it's been 4 years now, right? So no one's going to get mad at me at spoiling. We're not going to. It's like maybe nobody gets happy except for Kamala and the identity politic type people. We'll get basically a cackling Bran, and we'll have to be happy with it.
Maybe the J.B. Pritzker ending, the billionaire who.
Oh, Pritzker?
The billionaire who probably wouldn't win a competitive primary, but might want to take his shot in a weird situation, who has enough money to make himself competitive. Who knows? If it goes crazy, maybe J.B. Pritzker.
Oh my God! Please no. That I know too much about.
Governor of Illinois.
Yeah. Well, whatever you do, don't look up his sister who used to be his brother. Anyway, speaking of medical industrial complexes. So this was the end of it. This was the end of it here. We have, I don't know this isn't my meme. I saw this. So I think George Soros has the knife. Kamala's back there. She's happy. So Kamala I don't know if Kamala, maybe that's an arm. It's in the back. I don't know. But George Soros with the knife.
Or is it ice cream? Is Kamala having
ice cream? Yeah. But we definitely have Obama, and so I guess is that Soros represents the donors, Obama represents the kingmaker, maybe, or whatever, king and queen maker, and or a DNC, or at least one side of it.
Well, Obama's got to be Brutus, right? So it would be that the donors are Cassius. They're the ones who've been agitating for this for a while. Obama is the traitor, so he would be Brutus.
Okay, and then we have Gavin and Hillary looking. Happy about what's going on in the background. So even though I have nothing really positive at all to say about Joe Biden as a public figure, political figure, I could see why, especially if he's in a degree of senility, that he's quite angry right now. So better hope that nobody, I bet there's like a full-time brigade of people not wanting him to do a Trump and having his phone and just...
Whatever house he's in, every camera in that house has to be destroyed. Every recording device, they have to destroy all of it. Who knows what he might get up to if left to his own devices.
We think we want to know, but we do want to know, and I don't know. Anyway, Benjamin has a book coming out. Do you want to tell the people about that before we sign off?
Yeah, in November, I'm going to have a book out called Legitimacy in Liberal Democracies with Edinburgh University Press. So I'm looking forward to that, and I do hope that people will take an interest in it when it comes out.
Cool. Yes, please do. So thanks again. I'll work hard on making this a regular thing. Maybe once a month, I'll try to press Dr. Studebaker to come on and give his takes and predictions on the political on the politics or not so politics. I never have asked you if you like the distinction between politics and the political, if you find that useful or not. Maybe I will the next time.
I don't fuss too much about words. It's more about what we're trying to talk about.
Yeah. No, but when you said earlier, maybe it was 2 days ago, that even though you don't see anything positive coming out of this for the population, and certainly not much for like in terms of developing socialism, but you still need to do your political commentary. I was just wondering how you distinguish that. But
yeah, politics occurs when legitimation is happening. Yeah, and legitimation has stakes. It can succeed or fail, and to varying degrees. Right, and my book is all about legitimacy, so it is all about politics, as I see it. Right,
there you go.
When you don't have legitimation, you don't have politics.
So we'll end on that. If you don't have legitimation, you don't have politics. That's a Studebakerism. Do you want to be Studebakerian? That's a Studebakerian. That's a Studebakerism. Because you have too many syllables. You have too many syllables in your name, yo.
It's not for me to decide that stuff. That's for the people to decide.
Oh, look at you. You should be a politician. Okay. That's for the people to decide. I'm just... Hey, well, thank you very much, Benjamin. People, check out benjaminstudebaker.com. I'll pull up in the end credits. I'll put up the slide there that has his website on. Go check it out. Thank you very much. I've enjoyed this as always, and I will see you next time. Take care. All right. So we had two doses of Benjamin Studebaker this week. That's always nice. So now I need to do my least favorite part and ask for support. So please do like, subscribe, follow, share this content. This is what do we call it? Independent media. So nobody's paying me. And I do want to continue to work on morbid symptoms media, both in articles and podcasts, and develop connections with people like Benjamin Studebaker and also Garrett Ramirez, who was on a few days ago. We talked about the left's aversion to supporting armed struggle. And tomorrow, having a podcast, a live stream with Alexander McKay from the Marx Engels Lenin Institute to talk about how the left was so readily transed, or which means seemed to have swallowed whole gender ideology, even the most kind of eyebrow-raising aspects of that. So I really look forward to that. But I do need your support. So the easiest thing, the best thing the freest thing to do, the thing that's free, not your time-wise, but is to like, follow, subscribe on YouTube, on X, on Rumble. We also have a Substack, and I'll have a slide that's coming out in the closing credits that can give you more information. And also, if you have a morbid symptom, whether it be political or cultural or economic or whatever that you want to talk about, or you would like us to talk about, please do let me know. And it's always especially nice if someone also wants to come on screen and have a chat about it or make their case and get our comments about it. So that's always an open possibility. Thank you very much, and I will see you next time. This has been Democrat Game of Thrones with Benjamin Studebaker. See you next time.